Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. Welcome to Teacher Talk Live. In this particular session, we're going to be talking about how to enhance your Spanish 1 instruction. Soy Cindy Quinlan. I am a consultant with Abeka. I also teach Spanish, and I've been able to teach our Spanish 1 curriculum this past year. It is a tremendous privilege to be able to host Abeka's managing editor, Amy Yohe, and she knows a lot of this material, just has been working with the team for several years. And so in this time that you are taking today, we're hoping to just give a quick overview of the curriculum itself. Many of you have been teaching this now for several weeks, but some of you may be wanting to kind of see what it's like in anticipation for next year. So in addition to looking over an overview of the curriculum, we also want to talk about some of the digital resources. And some of you may have the curriculum right now, but you may not be aware of those digital resources, or it may not be something you have. And those will definitely be able to enhance your instruction. And probably what we're most excited about in this session is with Teacher Talk, our goal is to have teachers talking. And while Amy and I are teachers, we're excited to have other teachers. We've had other teachers that are using our Spanish 1 program answer some of the questions we've had, and you'll be able to hear from them. Some of you watching right now, that may be you. You were the one that took the time to share your thoughts and express your opinion. So thank you very much for that addition. And so Amy, I'll let you go ahead and get us started.
Well, I was going to say, Cindy, I'm going to leave the Spanish speaking fluency to you. I will not attempt to greet those joining us today in Spanish, but I am so thankful for your Spanish expertise, and I am thankful for Abeka's team and the Spanish expertise that God brought to the team for such a time as He had us developing these new products for Spanish 1, and hopefully we'll get to drop some hints about Spanish 2 today as well, since it will be available here very soon. And again, I'm just really thankful for our team. It's my privilege as managing editor to coordinate that talent. We are especially excited about the digital teaching aids, digital teaching slides that we'll be talking about really throughout the Teacher Talk today, with focusing more on it in the second half. So Cindy, it is exciting to take a look at the brand new products that are available to teachers through Abeka. As we talk today about how to enhance Spanish 1 instruction, we hope that all that's been built into our Spanish 1 product line, and it is a robust product line, many products represented even by just the 4 pictured here, to enhance Spanish instruction in the classroom. But we certainly don't expect that it stops there. It really is the teacher that enhances that learning experience, particularly when learning a second language. And so these resources will just be a starting point to provide some lesson plans, spark some ideas, provide some assessment opportunities. But it's really the teacher that will enhance the teaching and therefore the learning in their Spanish 1 classroom. So as we go throughout the Teacher Talk today, Cindy mentioned to you already that we're going to get to hear from teachers that are using these resources. Now, Cindy, you've used these resources in the classroom. You used the Spanish 1 last year, and you're using Spanish 2 this year.
So I'll try not to spill too many beans on Spanish 2.
One of our early release opportunities, and that's who we'll be hearing from in our conversation today, is that we were able to partner with 6 teachers last year who used the Spanish 1 materials the year before they were finalized and available, and were able to give feedback on those materials. And I reached out to them this week and said, we're going to be talking to teachers all around the country today. I would love for them to hear your voices because you've experienced a full year of utilizing the curriculum and enhancing instruction. And so I couldn't help but pull a number of their comments today that will just be a great resource to us in hearing how they've utilized these new products. So let's start today with Tyler. He's going to introduce himself and hear a little bit about what he thinks that the new Spanish materials have done to enhance his preparation to teach Spanish in his classroom.
Hi, my name is Tyler Bishop, and I'm the high school teacher at Howersville Christian School, located in Michigan. I've been teaching for 8 years, and I had the opportunity last school year to be a part of the early release pilot program for the new Spanish 1 curriculum that Abeka has. I'd been previously using the old curriculum, and I'd like to share some of the reasons why I'm a fan of the new updated curriculum. Abeka's new Spanish 1 materials make preparing for class a lot easier than the old curriculum. Each lesson contains step-by-step instructions on how to plan that lesson. The Teacher's Edition also has many helpful ideas and information on how to enhance your lesson. The neat thing about the new curriculum is that it's full of ideas, and you certainly don't have to use every single idea or step in every lesson. You can kind of pick and choose as well what you might like to use and implement and make it your own. So that's what I really like about it. Another neat thing is the lessons are really laid out nicely so that even if you're not a teacher that's fluent in Spanish, maybe you're having to kind of learn as well, the instructions and the content are set up in a way that it makes it easy to understand. So I'm a big fan of the new curriculum as far as the preparation goes. It makes life for teachers a lot easier, and it's also just very helpful.
Cindy, what I love about what Tyler shared is how the teacher materials supplemented, supported, maybe you would say, his preparation to begin teaching. It's a little bit intimidating to start teaching a brand new set of materials. And for teachers who may have taught Por Todo El Mundo, there I attempted it. That was a very poor attempt for many years, and are making this significant change for a number of reasons that we've built into the curriculum. I'm glad to hear from Tyler that the resources that have been developed have been useful to him and even flexible for him as well.
And I know that's what I've heard from a lot of teachers. I know some teachers have been able to teach Por Todo El Mundo for many years, and so they were very familiar with the ins and outs and how it worked. But I think, like you said, for maybe a teacher coming to it that's used to maybe a different construction, this one is probably more user-friendly, very much laid out by days with the lesson plans, as many of you have seen already.
It's incredible the number of contributors that were in Abeka's publishing team over the 5 years that this was being worked on. Native speakers from a variety of Spanish-speaking countries, a variety of educational backgrounds and experiences. But what really helped to broaden as well, especially the development of the teacher materials, were two different opportunities that we had to get expertise outside of Abeka and bring it into the product development process. The first of those opportunities was 2 summers ago. We sent out a survey to schools that used Abeka Spanish materials, and from that we were able to glean 7 teachers from all different parts of the country, all different educational backgrounds, all differing levels of fluency, all differing levels of comfort stepping in and teaching a foreign language, and said, could you take this summer and could you be a consultant for us? Could you read through our materials, give us feedback on how well you think they will work in your classroom? We were able to take just pages and pages and pages of notes of feedback from them, things they liked and wanted to see more of, things that they wanted tweaked, and we're able to apply that before we had our final year of using the product in a pilot type setting in the classroom, which is then the second opportunity where we partnered with you and those 5 other teachers to use the products with students last year. Again, such a variety. We had small classrooms and we had larger classrooms. We had folks in, again, different parts of the country and differing levels of proficiency for the teacher in their Spanish. And it was so exciting to hear feedback from each of them and to be able to implement some of that feedback in our final polishing that we did in the Spanish materials.
And I think that just highlights, for the teachers to know, because I get to work with publishing, but I'm not technically publishing. So I can say this as an outsider, but that really does highlight the heart of publishing. As I get to work with them closely, it really is how can we help teachers and getting that feedback and wanting to make a product that best helps you in your classroom, knowing that you in your classroom is very different from another teacher in his classroom. So what can we make that is the most flexible, that is most usable for multiple teachers to use?
Well, I'm thankful that you've picked up on that, Cindy, because it certainly is our heart as we pour our expertise and our resources into those materials. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of the teacher materials that you are getting familiar with if you're using them this year. One of the things that Tyler mentioned briefly and that I appreciate is what I would call the bonus features that are built into the teacher's edition. You've got the lesson plans right there in the margin, and then all around the rest of the sides of that spread, you're going to see notes and tips and thought provokers and different things to enhance your lesson. Another thing that's a great value is the ability to both formally and informally assess students along the way. So right here from the very beginning in lesson 2, there's something called a quick quiz. And this one is oral, which means it involves the students' listening skills. There's also oral reading quizzes, oral response quizzes, and content review quizzes in this quick quiz format. These are intended many times to be just informal opportunities for assessment. They can be your getting started in class, getting the juices flowing again, your opportunity to tie the known that you hope they're coming in with from the day before to the unknown that you're going to teach today. And then there's other occasions, and there's an example of where it's called for in the lesson plan. Notice it's just under review there. Under number 4, it calls for quick quiz over 1.1, so that oral review over section 1.1. But this one in lesson 4 appears differently in the lesson plan. This one, we would recommend that you give and grade this assessment, so it's a little bit more formal. You see 10 minutes is allotted because this one, the students are going to do some reading from the Oral Fluency Exercises book. And depending on your class size, you might even want to stretch this over 2 or 3 days so that you can hear a number of your students read and be able to assess their reading. Perhaps you decide not to have every student be graded for each oral reading, but 1 per quarter, 1 per semester, whatever works for you. We want you to be able to use these materials flexibly. Let's go back to Tyler for a moment then and hear what he's going to boil it down for us this time and tell us really what his favorite part is about the new Spanish resources.
My favorite part about the new Abeka Spanish 1 curriculum is just simply that it's new. It's been a while since a new version has come out, and in general, with the fresh look that it has, it's much more user-friendly. I like how, as a teacher, there's a lot more resources for me to look at and ideas that I can use, whether it's for a lesson, whether it's for how to quiz students. There's ideas that the book gives you and what kind of quizzes you can give. And then also just lots of neat little notes that are scattered throughout the teacher's edition. And so one of my favorite parts is it's just a fresh new look. It's really helpful for teachers because there's lots of resources that are available to them. And the nice thing about it too is you can make it your own. You don't have to follow every step by the book. It's meant, I think, to be a guide. And we as teachers have gifts in different areas, and so we can use those gifts to enhance the lessons even more and take lessons and even mold them into how we would like to present it that best suits our personalities. So just the fresh look of the new curriculum is what I really like about it.
It was extremely encouraging, Cindy, as we got feedback from these teachers, even just this week, to hear that so much of what we had attempted to build into the curriculum was resonating with these teachers. And I'm so glad Tyler highlighted the flexibility. We did put a note about it right there in the teacher's edition, because we know that as you're teaching a skills subject, and language certainly is that you're going to have to adapt to the learning pace, the learning acquisition that's taking place in the classroom. The flexibility is important.
And I would emphasize that. And I know we're going to hear another teacher that talks about that. But I was talking to another teacher last year, actually at the end of last year, and she had been teaching Spanish for several years, but she was using this curriculum. And she said one thing she had to learn was, I don't have to feel like I have to do every single problem in the book. In fact, the book is designed for the teacher not to do every single problem unless there is a need. And again, as we're going to see, I would also say that one of the things I do with the extra problems that we may not get done in class is if I have students, and last year and also this year, I will work with some students one-on-one. And if they're struggling with a certain area, I'll say, well, let's go back to that section and I'll go to some of the problems that we did not do, and I'll be able to practice those. And so it gives me a resource without my having to come up with other problems to work with students and give them that extra opportunity to practice. So yes, be flexible. Not to the point that you just throw the book out the door and say, I'm going to teach what I want, but there is a sense of don't feel like you have to do every single thing on every single page. It's not designed for that to be the case.
Good. You've alluded already to Lynn. We're going to hear from her next. Lynn is from South Dakota, has taught Spanish for many years, had taught Abeka's previous edition materials, and then joined us as an early release teacher.
The workbook format really keeps all of the students actively participating, even those who might just check out and let the class go by. They have to actively engage. I have to prompt once in a while to pick up their pencils and actually do it, but I can walk around, I can see them practicing. I can give quick little corrections, and I think the students who want to work on things more at home at least can have the section started and feel confident that I've looked at what they're working on and that they do know what they're doing. I did have one student comment just a couple days ago. I really like it that the workbook has more practice than we have time for in class, because then I can practice more at home. But I feel like I know what I'm doing because we started. And so that's really a benefit, I think, that they get to begin practicing and having that in-class interaction.
I thought it was great that Lynn highlighted, as you did, Cindy, that you don't have to do every single exercise, that we've put more into the textbook than is necessary for the average use in the classroom, but you can certainly use it for extra opportunities for the students. Really encouraging that one of her students actually noticed that for themselves. So as we take a look at the student textbook, one of the things that you probably noticed as you utilize the new materials this year is you don't have a separate vocabulary manual. The vocabulary is built right into the student textbook, and then also includes some illustrations that can help you review and apply that vocabulary. Another useful tool, and this came as a result of our early release teachers, part of their contract with us was to let us see into their classrooms, and we noticed that some were using physical vocabulary cards, and so our team said, you know what, there's no reason why we can't create those. And so we do have 4 sets of vocabulary cards. They are sold by the quarter, and just to make them affordable for you. But if you want to buy them by the year, you can get all 4 quarters, and it's priced in a way that you buy 3, you get 1 free. So what teacher doesn't love a great deal? And you can pick up those vocabulary cards. Certainly this is something that you could make on your own with stacks of index cards or whatever you'd like to use. But if you would prefer to have those, they're color coded by unit and just able to quickly pick those up, shuffle them, and use them to review with your students. I wanted to make sure that you knew that those resources are available to you.
And
also,
if I
go
can
ahead, Cindy, please.
Just put a plug in for flashcards. I've from my very first year of teaching, I've also taught a lot of English classes. We had vocab, different things, and I say flashcards are your friends. There's something, even as we have digital resources and they're valuable, there's something physical about having something physical. So I would say, just as someone who, no matter what I'm teaching, if it's something I want my students to know, having that physical flashcard. And Amy and I were discussing just the other day about these and saying, you know, well, what if someone says, oh, I could make them on my own? If you have that time and resource, I would encourage you to do so. If you say, you know what, it's a great resource, but I'd have a hard time fitting it in, then that's where you might be able to talk to someone and say, hey, Christmas is coming up and I have a great Christmas present, just as an idea. So I really would encourage that it's worth the time or the investment, whether it's you're making some your own or investing in ones that Abeka has provided. There really is something about students having it in the class. I like to also occasionally have students come to the front and the students review it with their classmate, because it's someone different, it's a different face, it's a different voice, and it gives them that opportunity. So the flexibility of having something physical is something that I just wanted to jump in and say that I'm a big fan of flashcards.
Well, Cindy, you're, in my opinion, an expert teacher, and so to see you get excited about a resource like that is very confirming to me. As we look and take another look into the student textbook, we're going to see a variety of grammar exercises. Lynn mentioned those. Cindy, you mentioned these as application opportunities. I think Tyler even mentioned the amount of practice that they can get in the book in order to help them acquire the language skills that they need. So they can get hands-on, they can be busy, actively demonstrating their acquisition of the language skills. Let's hear Lynn talk a little bit more about some of the value that she thinks the student textbook delivers to her students.
In terms of enhancing the student language acquisition, this new material really starts out, this new Spanish 1 starts out with a lot of focus, and the kids at first feel like there's a lot of focus on breaking things into syllables and how to pronounce individual sounds and whatever, but very quickly they catch on that it feels really good to look at a new word and know how to pronounce it. And so I think this material starts out by giving a lot of confidence in pronunciation of new words and a lot of confidence in how to approach a text and feel like they can say it out loud and not feel self-conscious. And then it also, because it has extra words that they haven't learned already, they do have to learn right from the start to try to understand things intuitively without knowing all the details. And that is how it works when you're working even in your own native language, but especially in a foreign language. You're always going to come across things that you don't know, but you can often guess what the content is getting at. And so I do like that this material includes things that they haven't explicitly learned already.
Cindy, I'm wondering if you could speak to that a bit more, because I would consider you a language expert. You know more than one language. And so anything to add to what Lynn said about just exposure?
Just breaking down the fear. And I know I'm talking to other language teachers too. There is something that students can be very trepidatious. They're very fearful of being wrong, especially in a foreign language. When you greet them with "¿Cómo está?" some of them go, and they're just so afraid. So just continuing to try to break down that fear. If they don't know it, it's say guess. Look at the word. What could it be? I forget. In class the other day, one of the words was barras. And that means bars. We were talking about chocolate bars, and it was barras. And I asked the student what he thought it meant, and he said, I don't know. I said, well, look at it, barras. What do you think? But a lot of the reason he said I don't know is there's just a fear that unless he has had it, he's not going to try to guess. So just encouraging them to guess. A lot of their guesses may be wrong, but they're at least logical, and that's what I always try to praise students on. That's wrong, but I can follow the thinking process, and you at least were logical. So getting them to realize errors in Spanish class is part of learning. And I know that's what you teach them every day, but continuing to emphasize that.
I think that's such valuable advice, because I can think of other subjects where teachers probably say, don't guess, there's a process, follow it. But in acquiring a language in a short amount of time, I mean, 170 hours over the course of a school year is not a lot of time to get immersed in the language. So just breaking down that barrier really helps to enhance learning. I figured this would come up eventually. Now is probably a good point. My son was in your class last year, didn't know any Spanish at all before stepping into your Spanish 1 classroom, and just a testament to your ability to create in him a love for the language as well. I was talking to him the other day. He wants to be an elementary teacher, and I said, Jaden, why don't you take some other courses, perhaps in sports management or something? You might have some coaching opportunities as well. And he said, no, Mom, when I go to college, I'm minoring in Spanish. And I thought, oh, wow.
Yes.
Senora Keeneland did an excellent job.
For better, for worse.
So that is just a personal example of where that breaking down that barrier, giving them confidence, letting them know it's good to try, and we'll practice.
And as Lynn said, his Spanish name is Joaquin. Joaquin has very good pronunciation. Some students just have a more natural ear. I believe he is one of them. But also that emphasis at the beginning of the book of pronunciation, of syllabification. If you have a student that is willing to put in the effort, they soak in a lot. And he's a great example of that. He wanted to put in the effort, and so he got a lot from it and continues to get a lot from it.
Good, super. Well, there are a number of review exercises then throughout the product that are going to help students to be successful in acquiring the language. And so the spiral review that's been built in, I don't want teachers to miss that, because that's what's going to help reacquainting students over and over and over until the language becomes more natural for them. Let's take a listen to Tyler again and hear his thoughts on how he helps enhance language acquisition using these materials.
Abeka's new curriculum also helps in Spanish language acquisition. And one of the best ways to learn a language is through repetition and just seeing words, phrases, hearing them again and again so that it kind of sticks with you. And as far as the new material goes, I really like how Abeka puts an emphasis on review. And so each unit will have several areas where there's review exercises so students can kind of see what they had seen already before and refresh themselves. And it's set up in such a way where you don't have to necessarily do every review section, but if students want an opportunity to do a little bit more, there's a chance to refresh themselves in the material.
Number of those review exercises you're going to also see at in classwork, kind of as you're checking homework, the book will say, hey, if you'd like, go to the review section and have them do this exercise. So again, you can choose if you feel like, hey, there's something else I want to substitute instead of that, you can do that. But that review is also built in not only on those review days, but also many times throughout each lesson.
That's such a great point, especially about the review activities that are assigned in curriculum. They are assigned so that students do get a natural spiral review, but you know better than anyone else what your students need to review. So if they have that concept down and don't need to spend time reviewing that, by all means, change up that exercise and make sure they're getting the practice that they need. Teachers have mentioned to us that they've enjoyed the featured countries that are a part of the Spanish 1 student textbook. There is a featured country in each unit, and there is content in the textbook, also content provided in the digital products that we'll be looking at in just a few minutes. Let's listen into another teacher. This is Angie. If I remember correctly, I believe Angie grew up in Spain, but was teaching Spanish here in the U.S. in Kentucky for the very first time using our materials.
One of the things that I have seen that my students tend to engage very much is the learning of the new countries, and having that possibility of showing them those slides that have been put together for me in the Spanish 1 curriculum has really enhanced and got them an interest for other countries of Spanish speaking origin. The videos, the slides in regards to those, and the reading material that they find in the book has really enhanced it. They love it. They want to learn more about it. The facts in regards to those countries that they're learning and the possibilities of maybe someday traveling to those countries has really enhanced. And I absolutely love being able to speak to the students and learn new things about other Spanish countries that maybe they didn't know before.
Sometimes some of my students, and as we may have some more diverse classes, some of my students are from those countries, or they have family members that are from there, or they visited there. So that's something I always like to find out, is who maybe has some personal experience, and then I can have them share. Other times I had maybe someone in church or maybe someone else in your ministry that is from there and can even come in and talk about those countries.
That's extremely helpful. And with technology these days, we also could have the opportunity to bring them in by way of, Zoom. Who knew what Zoom was?
Zoom a missionary, set up time with a missionary.
Indeed. Cindy, have you ever brought food into your classroom to enhance instruction?
I did. I had been in Brazil, actually, and so I had some ingredients that are actually also sold in Argentina. So when we were talking about Argentina, I brought those in, and students could dip that in. It was mixed with oil and bread, and I think I added too much oil. Probably wasn't the best culinary experience for them, but that was something I wanted them to try. Is this was something that the book had mentioned, and I had it in my kitchen, so let's try
That's great. What teenager is not motivated by food? So
what teacher isn't motivated by food?
It could be a help if you have the opportunity to do so. Super. We're still looking in the student book at some of the things that are included there just to enhance learning. One of the greatest goals of first year Spanish is to develop some conversational fluency, such that even after 1 year, perhaps a student could step into a Spanish-speaking country for a missions trip visit and be able to converse a little bit or get by somewhat.
Survive.
Perhaps not go into the wrong bathroom. That was an experience our youth group had while on a Spanish missions trip. But those survival skills, those skills that may not naturally come up academically as you're learning the grammar of a language, but are certainly important skills to be able to have in using this new language effectively. So there are a variety of survival skills, again, a section in each unit to focus on some of those. And I appreciate these. Our older 3 children were adopted from Ukraine, and the older 2 were 6 and 10 at the time. So there was a language barrier and some fluency that had to be gleaned in the process. And I remember we hired a tutor, in addition to what was being learned in the classroom, to come alongside and teach them the colors in English and time and some basic things that would have been beyond the academics of what would have been handled in their classroom. But just those, I guess, survival skills is a good word for it.
And I know when I was teaching the time survival skills, there's something about having something physical in your classroom. So for many years when I was teaching in Virginia Spanish, there was a broken clock that I used. And that was, just picture a K-5 or first grade
Yes.
teacher teaching time having, you don't have to have the bright yellow plastic one with the red hands, but to have something physical, to have a student come up and set the time and the rest of the class. So just having a physical clock, maybe an old one that's broken that you can move the hands easily, does help, specifically when you're teaching time. You could even build that into your lessons for the next several weeks, that you then have a clock or a time set, and when they come in the morning, part of their bell work is to answer ¿Qué hora es? Son las 3:20, son las 10:15. That could be something to continue building up that survival skill of knowing the time.
I think there's lots of little things that Spanish teachers do. I remember even from my own high school experience with Spanish was the fact that the teacher incorporated as much as she could, whether it was giving directions to us or greeting us or de-greeting us at the end. You start to build more and more, they develop an ear for it, I suppose, as they hear you utilize the Spanish.
And as they're developing an ear in the Spanish 1 curriculum, the directions are given in English, but then underneath it's given in Spanish. So kind of depending on where you are comfortable with, you could start helping them develop the ear by you giving the direction in Spanish, and they can follow along in English, and that way they're kind of hearing it as well as getting the meaning. So that's something else that you could do with the book.
Extremely helpful. Let's see what Tyler has to say next.
Another thing that I like about Abeka's new Spanish 1 materials is that it does help student interaction. I'll just share one example of this. One of my favorite new things about the curriculum is the oral fluency exercise book. This helps students apply what they have been learning and doing it in a way that makes them feel comfortable. Sometimes when you call on a student and you're asking them to speak Spanish in front of everyone, especially when they're just beginning, there's a lot of embarrassment. They're kind of afraid to say something wrong in front of everyone. This book here helps students just work with a partner and go through some of these concepts together with a friend where they might feel much more comfortable doing that. And so the new curriculum does give ways such as that really do aid student interaction.
You might have wondered, what is he showing there? That I don't have that purple folder. What Tyler was showing was the pilot edition, the early release edition of the oral fluency exercises that we had placed in a folder for his students to use. But it is exactly what you have in the Spanish 1 oral fluency exercises. It's a supplemental product. It may be something that even though it's called for in the lesson plans, you are not always able to get to at the same pace or sequence in which the lesson plans assign it. But I've heard some teachers who love the songs, others who don't enjoy them as much. Maybe it's their students that don't enjoy them as much, which makes it more difficult. But there's a number of different opportunities, from conversation practice to songs to Bible passages to just other selections that can help students develop that fluency.
I know some teachers may be using this curriculum in the junior high level. And so for those, if they say, how would it do? That would be an example of where I would say maybe take the Spanish 1 book and spread it over 2 years. But then as I was talking with the junior high teacher about that, I got excited because in spreading it out over 2 years, you're going a lot slower, but you also have a lot more opportunity to bring in some of the speaking and some of those extra in the teacher margin tidbits. So there's a lot of potential for developing a pretty rich, robust junior high curriculum by spreading this over 2 years and bringing in much of the extra speaking opportunities, practice opportunities that maybe a high school teacher doing it in 1 year couldn't. So that's something that I know some junior high teachers are already doing.
That's a great flexible point. And I believe that's how Tyler has been utilizing the Spanish 1, their school. And I think it is in their senior high, but they do it only 2 or 3 days a week. And so he actually stretches a full year Spanish course over 2 years, which I think in a lot of ways will increase the student's acquisition because you're spreading it out over that much time. So let's take one more listen at a comment Lynn has to make about the student book.
I think maybe my favorite part about the new materials is just, in fact, the large amount of Spanish that the students are seeing. And I like it that the verb tenses get mixed more than they did. This is a bit of a comparison of the old curriculum and the new curriculum too. But the verb tenses go back and forth a lot more in the new curriculum. And that's what happens in normal language. You don't just only speak in the present tense and then a month later use the preterite or whatever. You do use multiple tenses even in the same sentence. And even in Spanish 1, students begin doing that in this curriculum, and I like that.
Again, Cindy, that was such a great point about giving students the opportunity to, again, get exposed to more verb tenses and then mixing them together, and students are learning, again, just at a different level of fluency to be able to use the language effectively.
And keeping them separate, correct. One other thing we do want to have opportunity to do is to answer some of your questions. So some of you have already put that in the Q&A section. Some of you are putting that in the chat section. If you go ahead and put most of those questions in the Q&A section, that way we can be sure that we get to them. But I'm just going to throw this one in here because it's building off exactly what we were saying. What were these books or this curriculum originally created for? And I would say high school.
Yes.
I know some schools will teach them in 11th and 12th grade, so in that way almost upper high school. 9th grade is usually a little bit earlier, but there's a number of schools that will introduce these in 9th grade. I think if you were teaching 9th graders maybe go a little bit slower than if you were teaching 11th graders, just because those 9th graders maybe haven't learned. They haven't taken some of the more rigorous courses yet. They're just getting into the stage of rigorous courses. And so I know when I started teaching this to 11th graders, they'd already had biology. They'd already had Algebra 2 and some of those upper math courses. So they were a little more used to the rigor. If you're teaching 9th graders, just understand that they're 9th graders and they may not grasp things as quickly as 11th grade would be. So this wasn't necessarily created for junior high. This is for 7th graders to do in 1 year. And then Spanish 2 is for 8th graders to do in a year. But it could be, because of that flexibility, it could be stretched. Maybe that would be my recommendation at first. Take the Spanish 1 and stretch it over 2 years if you're going to bring this high school curriculum down into the junior high level.
Great opportunity to answer that question. We'd love to answer some more toward the end. And we would love for teachers that are watching to contribute with ideas of how they enhance Spanish learning instruction. So if they'd like to share those with us as well, we can certainly share those with everyone else here at the end. I think teachers pay teachers is great, but teachers giving away ideas to other teachers
even better.
is even better. Do take the opportunity as frequently as you can to help your students with speaking opportunities. They do need to learn the grammar, and I do think this textbook does a good job of giving students a strong grammar foundation. But understand that the intent behind the grammar is to better equip them to use the language effectively. And the way that the majority of our students will probably use the language in the future would be in speaking opportunities. Some may have the opportunity to write with the language in the future, but we hope for many of them it's conversing with Spanish-speaking friends in their communities, perhaps witnessing to someone that speaks Spanish. And so those speaking opportunities are very important, whether that's in the oral fluency exercises or even opportunities like this where there's just a call out right there in the book of how to utilize an exercise to give some more speaking practice.
And again, that'll be part of that flexibility with time that you could insert as you have that ability.
Awesome. All right, let's move into something we've hinted at several times, and we're excited to present in today's Teacher Talk Live. We hope that you have discovered these already, but just in case you haven't, part of the product line for the new Spanish 1 materials are these digital teaching slides with digital teaching aids. So this is a combined product. If you're familiar with our digital products already, we have had digital teaching aids in the past for a variety of subjects, which were images, video animations, interactive web pages. But teachers asked us, could you please create PowerPoint presentations? We're all creating our own. If Abeka could just create them to go along with the curriculum, then we could all not be spending our hours and hours in the evening creating our own. And so that is one of the blessings that the Lord has brought out of this very strange time that we have lived in over the last 18 months. And that is that we had an opportunity with some team members at first working remotely to be able to work on developing digital teaching slides. So what those are PowerPoint presentations. They can be opened in Keynote or Google Slides. And probably the best feature about these, Cindy, is that they're completely editable. They do match the curriculum exactly, but we know not every lesson goes exactly as planned, so they are completely editable for the teachers to adjust. And we say with digital teaching aids, just so you know, if you're familiar with our aids, that it does include the images, the video animations, and some interactive web pages as well.
And so that's where, and I know you'll see it in just a bit, if it's an animation that you would have to, or if an interaction that you would have to do online through an HTML, it'll have a slide that'll direct you to be able to do that, so you can go back and forth.
Let's hear what Tyler has to say.
Abeka's new curriculum also offers some new things that help enhance each lesson. And what I mean by that is, in addition to the textbook that the students have, Abeka also has some online resources that go with the material. One of them are PowerPoints. So as you teach a lesson, there are some already made PowerPoints that teachers can use to help teach the concepts that are in the book. Another cool thing that Abeka has is another online resource where you can review the verses. You can also look at flashcards of the vocab words that have some pictures, and you can do a little game with your students with that. That online resource also has kind of an outline of the lesson in helping you to aid as you teach. And so Abeka really has invested in making some more resources available for teachers that do enhance each lesson.
One of the things I like to do is when I first introduced the verse, the digital teaching aids would have a native Spanish speaker that would come. And I'm not a native Spanish speaker, so I liked for them to have that ability to hear that, but also just to have a different voice. Some of you may be a native Spanish speaker, but you know just how different the accents are from different countries or even different regions. So just to give them greater experience of hearing someone else's voice. So that's a benefit.
Let's take a look at some of those example slides. So this is what you would see on your dashboard once you purchase the Spanish One digital teaching slides. And then you go to the downloads menu and you've got a teacher training tutorial at the top there. So if you'll watch that, that will just help acquaint you with all of the value that's packed in to this digital teaching slides product. And then there's also a slide template. So I mentioned that everything's fully editable, but we also gave you all the designed slide background so that you can create your very own slides, even your entire own lessons if you choose to. Once you click on one of those units, it's going to open up the menu where you can either download all 14 of those lessons at one time, or you can download them one at a time if you prefer. As we continue taking a look at an example of a presentation slide, here's just an opening title slide. And then there are slides that are merely practical in nature. This particular slide reminds students on the left what to have out to check from homework the night before. And on the right tells them what classwork assignment for review they should be doing while the teacher walks around and checks homework. So nobody can say, I'm not sure what I was supposed to do, or I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be working
right on the board.
It's right there available for them. So trying to remove some of the excuse. Let's take a look at a couple of other slides. Here is one that is the introduction of a brand new Bible passage, and this slide does put the Spanish right next to the English, just like it is seen in the textbook. And I would foresee teachers using this slide particularly probably on the first day, maybe the first or second day that they introduce the Bible verse, so that the students can see it in the context of the English that they're more familiar with. Cindy, you mentioned this, the prompts that are throughout the digital teaching slides that just prompt the teacher to go to the interactive, which is on that web page. And in this case, it's another example of how you can review the verse. You see the speaker icon at the bottom, which tells you that there is an audio recording from a native speaker, as you mentioned, from a variety of different Spanish-speaking countries. So there's variety there. And then you can also click on the words in the verse and actually make them disappear. And so whether you want to first just take out a few words, and then as they get more and more practice with the verse, take out more words and see if the students can recite the verse with the words. You can hide all the words. You can reset and put all the words back in. You can write right on this slide if you choose to, and then be able to erase it. There are some tools off to the side to be able to do that. So lots of interactive opportunities in practicing the Bible verse.
And I do want to point out this feature of having the words. It's a great way to practice the verse, and something I wasn't aware of for months. So if you are using the DTAs and weren't aware of that, you can now know and take advantage of it.
Isn't it amazing? We can struggle with something for time. I shouldn't imply that you were struggling, but you were doing something else, and like, it's in the front matter. It's in the front of your, and I'm like, oh, it was there the whole time. Been there, done that. Here are some examples of how the digital teaching slides help to introduce vocabulary, this is actually a video. I just took a screen capture of it, but a video of a rotating digital wheel of sorts that is introducing the vocabulary words. Again, a native speaker pronouncing them, and you see the English small underneath. So this is a great way on that first day to introduce a new vocabulary list. Also included in the digital teaching slides is an alternative way to introduce and review the vocabulary, and that is with an illustration, a quite modernized illustration compared to our previous edition textbooks. So that is an example of the illustrations that you could use as a visual cue for your students. And then there is a third way to be able to practice vocabulary with them. Here's another one of those prompts to go to the digital teaching aids, and this one gets you to the interactive web page where there are digital flashcards where the students can work with flipping the flashcards over back and forth and quiz themselves. You can quiz them, they can quiz each other, and then there's also the audio there if that's helpful to them as well. The oral fluency exercises, there are prompts in the slides to say, okay, now it's time to take that oral fluency exercises book out and work on a conversation, in this case from that book. And then there are also video animations with audio that help to introduce and at least get them started on these conversations. So there are two different Spanish speakers going back and forth with an example or two of this conversation to help students get started. And then as we get into the grammar instruction, there will be one more prompt to go back to that interactive web page again, if you choose to do it in this way, and that would be to use the drop downs. In this case, it's for survival skills that will help you to teach in meeting and greeting. So this particular one has vocabulary flashcards that go along with these meeting and greeting phrases. Other times it's a table, an image from the textbook that's a table. Perhaps sometimes it's a couple of examples that students can use to follow along in their books. There are also additional slides built in for you to be able to review and practice. So if this one was animated, it would give good morning and your students could respond with buenos dias, and then you could click to show them that they're right, or you could reverse it and do just the opposite. You heard one of the teachers mention earlier how much they enjoy the country features, not only in the textbook, but also in the digital teaching slides and digital teaching aids. Each country does have a 3 to 5 minute animated video that goes along with that country, coordinates with the text in the textbook, and just walks the students through some special features of that particular country. Here's another place to remove excuse. When you have finished the instruction and it is time for your students to begin practicing for the last few minutes of class, applying what they have learned from your instruction, here is an example of the classwork that they're assigned to work on. Perhaps you send some to the board to put some things up on the board. That could be obviously the smart board or the chalkboard, and you're walking around assisting others, but nobody has an excuse of what they should be working on.
I keep chuckling because Lynn mentioned earlier, Lynn, that, now and then you have the workbook format and your kids can follow along, but occasionally you have to tell them to pick up their pen and do it. And I was just chuckling because I teach big kids, I teach high schoolers, and yes, occasionally I have to say, all right, this is what you're doing, now do number 2. So yes, having the classwork may sometimes help them.
They might be thinking about the big game or the big race that's
There's sometimes
coming up.
A few more interesting things than Spanish class.
And then certainly another just very practical slide that lists the homework assignment. Rather than having to read it out 2 or 3 times until everyone gets it written down, you can display the homework assignment, give it to them maybe orally just one time, and then they're responsible to get that written down. So that's just one example of walking through some of the sample slides that are available in the digital teaching slides package. Let's go back to Angie and hear about her favorite part of the new Spanish materials.
One of my favorite parts of teaching the Spanish 1 new curriculum is the use of the PowerPoint presentations and the fact that students nowadays are very much in tune to when it comes to technology. So having those PowerPoints with the vocab help me to keep the students engaged and keep them interacting with me. I'm able to scroll back and basically adjust however I want to do vocab games. So having those PowerPoints and slides help me to also accommodate to be able to teach them exactly what I want them to learn. Add things, take things out, depending on the lesson and the amount of material that I've been able to cover. So that's one of my favorite things when it comes to the Spanish 1 curriculum and enhancing my presentation with each of my lessons.
There's no one product that would fit every single teacher. And I think that's why they're deliberately made editable. As a teacher who definitely likes to put my personal spin on things, I appreciate having a thing to start with and then being able to change it to match what I'd like to do with my students.
Sure. What I gave you a sneak peek at just then was the Digital Student Boost, which is another digital product that Abeka has created to be a help to students. We know that students are going to need to, as with any subject, need to invest some at home in their homework practice time, in their study time to be prepared for quizzes and tests, to develop their language acquisition. And so this is a brand new product line that is beginning with Spanish 1 called Digital Student Boost. This is going to contain a number of similar resources that are in the teacher's digital teaching aids package that's embedded within the digital teaching slides, but this would be purchased by the student, by their parent, so they can download it on their own device. And they'll get those same vocabulary list, oral fluency video animations, verse and vocab reviews. In fact, I've got the tutorial here, and I thought we might watch just the first few seconds of it and the last little bit of it to see what value the Digital Student Boost can deliver to our students.
Welcome to the Spanish 1 Digital Student Boost tutorial. In this tutorial, we will show you how this review will make your studying easier and profitable. After purchasing, click on your Abeka.com account dashboard to log in. On the dashboard, click on Digital Teaching Aids and scroll down till you get to the Spanish 1 Digital Student Boost. Click on the View Downloads button. That will bring you to the Spanish Student Boost menu. This menu acts not only as a place to download your files, but also as a cloud-based storage for your files. You can access your files anywhere you have an internet connection. On the left side, you will see a list of collections that include videos and interactives you can access. Ready to learn your Spanish vocabulary? 2 videos are included from each vocabulary unit. Find the list you are learning, click on the link to view the video. Each of the lists will be shown on a rotating wheel with the English word underneath the current word being learned. A native Spanish speaker says the word and gives you enough time to repeat the word being learned before moving on to the next word. Seeing the word, hearing the word, and speaking the word will help develop your vocabulary proficiency. Think you know all of your Spanish vocabulary words? Hop on over to the Vocabulary and Bible Verse Review tab link and quiz yourself with the vocab review cards. Under Vocabulary Review, click on the Show Lists button. You can choose specific lists you would like to review. Selecting all means that all lists will be included in your review. Clicking on Hide Lists allows you to start the review. The Spanish word is on one side. Press the flip button to reveal the English version. The shuffle button mixes up the words. Otherwise, press the arrows on the sides to go straight down the lists. Press on the speaker button to see if your answer matches the native Spanish speaker. Listening to a native speaker will help you become more fluent in the Spanish language. Bible Verse Review gives passages for all 12 units. You can hear the verse read by a native Spanish speaker, read through the verse, recite the verse from memory, and hide individual words each time until you have the verses memorized. Another enjoyable feature of this product is the featured country videos, which are correlated with the country highlighted in each unit. These colorful animations provide a detailed look at people, foods, and culture of each country. Videos that correlate with your oral fluency exercises book will give you additional opportunities to see, hear, and say Spanish words, phrases, and sentences. You will also learn how to have simple, fluent conversations in Spanish. By using these powerful review tools, you will find that the Spanish Student Boost is an ideal addition to your Spanish 1 class. With this boost, we know that you will succeed in learning another language.
You can certainly help your students get to the Digital Student Boost and be able to see how this will help them. As I mentioned, it has the same vocabulary videos that you introduced in class. So if they need some practice hearing again that native pronunciation and being able to mimic that, they will have that resource. They will have the oral fluency exercise videos as well. If there's one that you're not able to get to in class, they would still be able to practice that one on their own. It does have the digital flashcards flashcards, again with the audio. And if we had been able to watch more of the tutorial, you would see clicking on this Show List button opens up the list menu, and they can mix list 1A and B with 2A and B and 3A and B to get ready for that first that comprehensive vocabulary quiz that they take, and you can just continue adding those lists and practicing. I know memorizing vocabulary, many times students will memorize it to pass the quiz, but they're not necessarily going to retain it unless they're going back and revisiting. So I think those slides will be a help to them, those digital flashcards. It does have the Bible verses as well, so they would be able to go in and practice their verses and drop out words as well. And then we did include, in case you weren't able to get to it during the class time, we did include the country feature animations as well. So they might have a favorite country that is featured in the textbook and would enjoy taking a look at that. Let's hear from Lynn one more time as we're getting close to wrapping up our conversation today.
And I do take, sometimes even in Spanish 1, I take prayer requests and then I pray for those requests in Spanish. And it's exciting to the kids to see how they can, once they know the ideas that we're going to be praying about, and if I stick to the prayer requests, they are pleased right away that they can follow when I was talking about which request, even if they have barely just started Spanish. I do love the verses, and I do practice the verses extra as well. I put them on the board. I underline the different parts of speech in different colors, and then I practice. The students, I find that the students learn much better if we practice by erasing words and saying them out loud many, many times. So I do usually incorporate one longer period of time in each unit where we're practicing the verse in class. And sometimes they love it if there's time after we practiced it and gotten the entire thing erased, if I let them go up to the board and fill the words back in then. They always feel like that's a good reward if they've been efficient.
I thought that was an important clip to include because as Christian Spanish teachers, we want to incorporate a biblical worldview into our Spanish class. And so I loved how Lynn said she incorporates prayer time and the students can listen to her praying in Spanish and start to pick up on their request as she prays for them. She enjoys the verse memorization. We do have a missions mindset emphasis in our country features and would encourage interaction with missionaries and seeing perhaps if there's a project that students can do to support a missionary in a Spanish-speaking country. But I thought it was important to mention how you can incorporate biblical worldview into your Spanish class as well.
That's why I always enjoy having the passages and being able to meditate in some ways on a passage for 2 weeks, for 2.5 weeks, trying to bring out those truths. I know often I am memorizing the verses along with my students. Since this was a newer curriculum, there's some different passages in there. And so I sometimes am laying my head on the pillow and I'm thinking of our memory verse, and the Lord is just using that to remind me of his promises that we're bringing out in Spanish.
That's great. Well, Cindy, I know we had a lot we wanted to share today, particularly from the voice of some of our early release teachers. So I appreciate, again, their contribution. And I hope it's been an encouragement to you to hear from teachers who are in the trenches with you, teaching these brand new Spanish products. Let's spend the last few minutes that we have together looking at any additional questions or perhaps hearing suggestions of how you enhance Spanish instruction in your classroom. Cindy, did we have any other questions or comments?
Yes. And just my own personal thanks to Tyler, Lynn, and Angie. And I also enjoyed being able to see some of you videoed in your classrooms, and it's always fun to see those videos there. Beth just had a quick question. Can this Zoom meeting be watched? These are recorded, and you may find them typically on the Abeka Christian School Teachers Facebook page. You'll find this in the section with the other Teacher Talk Live videos. Now, we talked about how flexible this curriculum is. We mentioned ways of using it in junior high. We talked about how it's built originally for high school, knowing that it could be flexibly adapted. So we do have Sylvia wondering, could this go as low as elementary? Do we have a separate product for elementary students?
I think the grammar that's included in the Spanish one is probably going to exceed the understanding of an elementary student too quickly. Perhaps there are portions of it, but this probably wouldn't be the best way to approach elementary Spanish. But Cindy, I'm so glad she asked that because there does seem to be a growing interest in Spanish in the elementary. So I'll head upstairs here in just a bit and make sure our elementary editorial team is aware that she asked that and is interested in an elementary Spanish product. I think it's something I'd like to see worked into activity time, kind of alongside art and music and spelling bee one day.
And then that could be something that your son teaches one day in elementary as an elementary teacher. Kayla was wondering, again, how can we get this presentation with the videos of when we heard from Tyler, Lynn, and Angie? That was captured in the recording as well. So you'll be able to hear from them again. A lot of you were very interested in our digital materials. Is that sold on the Abeka website? And yes, 3 of you were able to receive that free gift of the digital teaching aids and digital teaching slides, which come in one package. You purchase them and you see the digital teaching slides, and then the digital teaching aids are there on the side in a little tablet. So that does come together, and then the Student Boost is also available. And I just was learning more about the Student Boost recently. At first I thought it was digital flashcards, which was neat, but then when I heard that it also has the Bible verse, it also has the oral fluency exercises, that is something I could easily encourage my students to purchase, knowing that it would be well worth their time if they're willing to put that extra time into it.
And if you go to Abeka's website and you Google, if you enter on Abeka's search digital teaching slides, you'll see the Spanish come up very quickly along with the others that are available. Digital Student Boost is going to bring up specifically that Spanish one, Digital Student Boost. And I think the student one is $20.
Right.
So it's very affordable and a tool that can be used all year long to help master those 720 vocabulary words.
I would be willing to spend more than $20 for that. That would be neat and exciting. And I know a couple of you are just again saying you came in late. Again, this whole recording will be available on the Facebook page for Abeka Christian School Teachers. And as you have more questions, maybe you're watching this at a later time, you're not able to ask that question live, go ahead and put that in the Facebook comment, and we'll try to go back and look through and answer those questions. And then other teachers too can put in some of their questions and be able to hear from that, or put in some of their answers and be able to hear that input.
Yeah, I was going to say, share some of the ideas and keep that conversation going as you try something and it works well in your classroom this year. Find opportunities to share it with other Spanish teachers, whether it's through the Facebook post of this particular webinar. We also have a group for Abeka Christian School teachers that you could join, and you could swap ideas right there on the Abeka Christian School Teachers group. So feel free to check that out as well.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. We know this is at the end of the school day. We know some of you have taken time perhaps on a weekend to watch this. So your time is always valuable. Your feedback is always valuable. You have the ear here of the managing editor. Keep those comments coming. And we trust we'll be able to see you perhaps in person as the Lord brings our paths together, or perhaps virtually at another time.